India officially announced the inauguration of 5G network services in the country earlier this week at the India Mobile Congress in the capital. Now, 5G promises to offer lower latency, higher capacity and increased bandwidth as compared to previous generations of wireless technologies. 5G will also provide businesses with greater flexibility, hopefully reduce costs and enable applications that aren't possible today. In fact, 5G will be the foundation of a smart, connected world in which artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and extended reality can be leveraged to the full potential. India's telecom sector is betting big on the transformative power of 5G, and telecom companies are already going live with 5G services across urban India. Airtel today said that it is live in 8 cities, while Jio is beta testing in Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata and Varanasi, with plans to go full throttle in 2023. 200 Indian cities will have access to the technology in the next 6 months. Now, as per a report from GSMA, Indian telecom giants are expected to invest between $19.5 to $20 billion in the development of advanced infrastructure for 5G by 2025. The report added that 5G could benefit the Indian economy by $445 billion between 2023 and 2040, or more than 0.6% of the GDP forecast for the year 2040. Now, this is hardly surprising given that the transition to 5G has the potential to transform lives, bridge the digital divide, and enable newer avenues of socio-economic growth. The opportunities are plenty, and startups are leading the charge by building applications that can unlock new cases and revenue streams through innovative business models. From smart manufacturing to immersive content like AR, VR, cloud gaming, to smart healthcare, virtual education, and even autonomous vehicles. Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan. Joining me today to talk about the 5G potential are Aakrit Vaish, co-founder and CEO of Haptik; Rajesh Mishra, the founder and CEO of A5G Networks; also with us, the founder and CEO of Echelon Edge, Gaurav Gandhi; and Anant, the co-founder and CEO of Tweek Labs. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Aakrit, let me start by asking you, at the start of the program, we've already laid out some numbers that various forecasters are talking about in terms of the potential that 5G has to offer as and when it is completely and truly available and accessible. Now, I want to understand from you, how are you reading this change, and how are you, more importantly, gearing up for this transition?
Thanks, Shireen, for having me here. Good to see you again. So I think, look, every wave of new technology and innovation means that industry evolves, and accordingly, all of us have to evolve. 5G, of course, has been in the works now for a couple of years, so it's not something new to most of us. Everybody has been preparing for it. I think the numbers are there for everybody to see. I think there is going to be a significant impact in terms of the way consumers use the internet and how much they use it and the speed at which they use it. You mentioned, but definitely areas such as AR, VR, AI across video, things like metaverse are going to become much more of a reality now, because we will have the bandwidth and the speeds available to support it. At Haptik, we have been in the AI business for almost a decade now, and we have now started thinking about how some of our conversational capabilities can be applied to these new mediums, such as video, AR, VR, and so on. And from what I know, every vendor or technology provider these days with this transition is thinking about how they can ensure that they have required tool sets and all of these new technologies, because it's time for consumerization of all of them.
Well, time for consumerization of these new technologies like 5G. I'll ask you to break that down for me in just a second, but let me go across to Rajesh now. Rajesh, to start with, I know that most of you probably spent your weekend here at the India Mobile Congress in the capital. Two telecom players, that's Bharti Airtel as well as Jio, have now decided to go ahead and launch services, beta testing for Jio and select cities for Airtel to start with. 2023 is when we're looking perhaps at pan-India rollout for both these operators. I want to understand from you, Rajesh, I mean, for A5G networks, for instance, to put it simply, what does this mean?
So for A5G, what we are trying to do is build a new architecture or a new way of deploying 5G. So that way you or the consumers can decide what the future and what the applications look like. For example, if the networks were still 2G, we probably wouldn't know about Uber like the way we know today, or all the food applications. So the 5G is very different. It's very new. It's not just the more bandwidth. It's about a lot more than that. And our goal at A5G is actually build a new type of software, new type of architecture, so that someone else actually decides what the next Uber looks like. And we don't become the bottleneck into
so
that.
when you say things like you don't become the bottleneck, hopefully you remove the bottlenecks. But when you say things like, A5G functions like an Airbnb software that unifies different types of properties, decode this for me in plain English. What does this mean exactly?
Sure. We talk about AR, VR, or a lot of different applications. And honestly, these applications work well on 4G or even on Wi-Fi. So what's new on 5G? The idea of 5G is the lowest latency possible, right? So to do that on 4G becomes very challenging. With Wi-Fi, it has its own challenges. So what we try to do is put our software in as many data centers as we can. And whether they are big data centers or little data centers, most of the softwares in the industry, they actually require a very heavy data center resources. So our software, and again, this is the Airbnb analogy, our software can sit on the lightest weight data center. So that way, when the 5G users connect to it, they have the applications literally next door to them. This is where the lowest latency AR, VR applications are possible. And this is very different, because as we go for the lower latency, we would need the data to be much, much closer to the people. And our software sits on these data centers with some of these edge applications along with us. And we just exit those data right to those applications without necessarily hauling them all the way back.
Let me go across and speak with Anant Sharma, the co-founder and CEO of Tweek Labs. Anant, many thanks for joining us here on the program. You are the new kid on the block, so to speak, as far as this panel is concerned. A sports tech company founded in 2019 by IIT Delhi graduates. Anant, what is Tweek hoping to do, and what does 5G mean for you?
So what we do at Tweek Labs is we build motion capture suits at a consumer level. So you can say that, something like a garment that someone wears and, kind of plugs themselves kind of in the metaverse. In AR and VR right now, with the current devices that you see, you have visions, you have virtual reality and, digital assets that you can see. But to really immerse yourself inside, you kind of need your body. You need your body's movements, and to digitalize them is what a motion capture suit is for. What we are right now kind of doing is building it for sports, because there is 3D information that you kind of need to render, which will actually enable athletes and coaches to understand their body better. Now, for these kind of things, you need a lot of processing. Which is something that you cannot have on your edge devices. Edge devices meaning your phones or your laptops. We kind of need a very good communication channel, reliable, low latency communication channel to get it to the cloud. And that's where 5G is kind of impacting us here. In general, what we do.
Okay, so I would imagine at this point in time, the use cases for high performance athletes at this point in time. Well, talking about plug and play, I walk around connected to my microphone and my earphone pretty much through the day. So I understand the plug and play model to some extent. But Aakrit, let me come back to you now. We're talking about use cases and what 5G is probably going to enable us to be able to do. But at this point in time, in terms of the use cases in the countries where 5G is already rolled out, the US, China as examples, for instance, what are the use cases that are different at this point in time? Because Rajesh was talking about, will we find the next Uber and so on and so forth. So far, we haven't really seen or heard of a compellingly new use case at this point in time.
See, I think there are 2-3 parts to that question, right? So first, not, just like when mobile apps came, everybody said, okay, listen, let's find like 1,000 new things on mobile apps to do, and then websites will go away. Not every technology evolution necessarily warrants that there should be like all sorts of new use cases. In fact, the way we should think about this is the reverse, right? We should identify problems that exist, and how can 5G as better, faster network actually solve it. And then the second you mentioned about US and China, and I think this we've all seen, right, over the last, 20, 30 years, is that not necessarily the same set of problems or use cases are applicable across geographies, and particularly in India. So I actually think that a lot of India first problems can be solved once we have pretty much nationwide 5G deployment. I mean, just imagine the application of things like augmented reality or virtual reality in agriculture or agri-tech, right? Where, in the remotest parts of the country on farmland, if you have the ability to, just take your phone, turn the camera on, look at crop around you, and then be able to tell what it's doing. So I think we will see, much like anything else, lots of India first use cases and being solved for the problems that, let's say the country has across agri, health, edtech, and many others.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, and let me get Rajesh to come in on that as well. Rajesh, as Aakrit was mentioning, we perhaps should look at it as problems that India needs to solve and try and see how 5G can enable bringing solutions at scale to be addressed some of those. In your assessment, where do you believe we're going to start to see the big ramp up? Which are those areas that you believe we're going to start to see the ramp up? And specifically, as far as your own business plans are concerned, in terms of expansion, what do the next 12 to 18 months look like, given the fact that we now have seen the launch, at least as far as two telecom operators are concerned?
Yeah. So, having involved and having our team actually involved in what was Open RAN journey, which is started in a 4G world about 10 years ago. The fundamental thing about 4G, 5G, and again, it may sound kind of counterintuitive, that 4G and 5G don't really offer a speed differentiation. It's a hardly a minuscule amount of efficiency 5G offers. What's best about 5G is about the new spectrum. If the new spectrum didn't, get allocated in India, then 5G wouldn't really be a big differentiator story. This is where 5G shines, meaning you get a newer spectrum, you get to divide up that spectrum for different applications. And this is kind of how we need to look 5G about, is you have a large chunk of spectrum, that means some more data, uplink or downlink, or some combination of that. How you divide in terms of the users downloading on their mobile phone versus the fixed wireless access, that's actually turning out to be a really good use case in the US. All of a sudden, Verizon and T-Mobile are actually big, they're pushing, and they're gaining a lot of customers on the last mile fixed wireless access. So those are kind of the use cases which are showing up. And in terms of India, I do believe the fixed wireless access will be a big different use case, what we haven't seen in 4G world, because again, we now have a spectrum to divide up, and the private networks will be another one. However, on a private network, we have to caution about making a really differentiated use case compared to Wi-Fi, and there are some use cases where it works well, and some use cases it's as good as Wi-Fi. In terms of A5G, actually, we are a global player, so we are actually working with global operators. And in some countries, we are actually part of their infra build-out for providing the 5G core software, which our team here in Pune builds. In India, we had announced our relationship with Vodafone in India last Mobile World Congress about a private network pilot. So those are kind of the opportunities. So one way I look at it is, we are still deploying 4G around the world. There are many African countries where I'm actually, A5G provides a 4G software as well. So we are talking to them about their brand new 4G launch. So 5G is not just now, it's about 15 years worth of business for any company who starts at this moment.
Gaurav, I want to understand from you as well what the road to expansion looks like in terms of your client roster, etc., and also in terms of spectrum and regulation. As Rajesh was pointing out, there is still some grey there in terms of private and captive networks. So far, there's only one company, that's Adani, that has got spectrum outside of the telecom operators to set up a private or a captive network. I want to understand from you your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I agree to Rajesh. There is, still some clarity need to be given by government on the captive and private networks. But they have already enabled us through the service providers. Like we are working with BSNL in that. So we are going to use their spectrum to provide private and captive, services. So we are looking, in fact, because in like US, in other countries, private spectrum is completely separate. Even you need not to go to the service providers. So the government can enable us also, or enable all the industries, so they can apply for the spectrum and they can use as per their requirement. So, but still, we already, we have already started our POC. The spectrum is testing spectrum has been allotted to us from DOT. And we are looking forward to work and do some commercial deployment starting from January on BSNL spectrum till the time private spectrum is not allowed to every end point or every end industries. And the roadmap is very interesting. To be very honest, it was like from 10 years we are in telco. It was never, like that before. From last 1 year, that kind of traction we have seen, and the IMC was also a great success for us, grand success for us also. Because every minister, every ministry, everyone came there and tried to understand all the use cases like agriculture, mines, so that way we see a lot of potential. We have already more than 100 requirements to start our trials and POCs in multiple industries. We are looking forward for that. We have a lot in hand. So now we just need to align to the requirements. So there are multiple, use cases in every industry. This private 5G or private LTE is required. And as of now, at least we have, spectrum allowance through BSNL and through, testing spectrum we can apply with government. So once if it is allowed to every private entity, then the traction will be much more. The things will be more easier to roll out.
Yeah, we are still waiting to hear from the government on private networks. But let me go back and understand from Anant what the future looks like as far as Tweek is concerned for these customizable suits. Anant, you're talking about a big global opportunity, but how long before we actually, what's the runway looking like for you at this point in time before you actually head in that direction?
Yeah, I think this is not very far away from our point of view. I think in general, there is going to be, the world is going to turn out to be smarter. And this is something that's inevitably going to happen because of the infrastructure that the whole world is kind of building in terms of technology. Even, when you say that, when 5G comes in and there is a lot of enablement that happens for startups like ours, right? I mean, there are things that become possible which we did not have to build specifically. We did not have to put resources on, but there are other people and other enablers, exactly like telecom operators who spend so much resources in getting that infrastructure ready for 5G to make things more reliable from whatever products that we develop. Of course, startups like ours will go and solve those kind of niche problems. Let's say, creating a manufacturing pipeline for apparel with wires embedded in them and sensors embedded in them, which is, again, a niche hard problem to solve, but there is a larger, a much more expensive problem to solve that enables these sensors to then communicate to the cloud, which is then again something that you use existing technology to kind of connect with. So the only reason why startups who are able to solve these niche problems are able to come into the market is because of their standing on the shoulders of these giants who are enabling us in their technology.
Okay, well, you believe that the world is going to be smarter. I hope it's not going to just be tech smart. I hope we are going to see people make more rational decisions, more empathetic decisions as well. But Aakrit, let me come back to you now. You are part, of course, of the Geo platforms now. And you were talking about what this is actually going to mean in this new 5G world, the kind of conversations, the kind of engagement that brands are likely to have with their customers. In terms of further customization, in terms of further personalization, etc. Give me a view of what the world is likely to look like.
I think from our perspective, what Haptik does and also what Haptik does as part of Geo platforms, I think it's more of the same but accelerated. So one area about where we think there's going to be a lot of adoption and acceleration is going to be this whole idea of engaging through video. So if you think about it, video commerce as, let's say, a way of brands engaging with consumers is something that's very mainstream in the US and really, really huge in China. We think that that is going to be a big area of innovation in India from various reasons. Video as an engagement medium is anyways very popular. Consumers and people love, doing things through video. So we think that presents a fairly large opportunity. And because of this accelerated, better connectivity, low latency bandwidth, we think there's a lot you can do over there. So that's one area. The second is, our efforts towards augmented reality and the metaverse at large. There is a lot of buzz around, everything that we talk about in the metaverse, headset, Oculus, and so on. But we need to, back to my earlier point, consumerize some of these use cases. I think by bringing in better, again, connectivity, low latency, and trying to build AI models on top is now possible. So we're going to see a lot of innovation when brands are trying to engage consumers through the metaverse, powered by lots of data and AI coupled together. So those are the two areas that we feel we're very excited about and we think will accelerate because of this transition, video commerce and then augmented reality and metaverse at large.
Okay, video commerce, metaverse, those are going to be the areas of opportunity that we could see companies like Haptik leverage on. And of course, Rajesh, Gaurav are also hoping to be able to build out the ecosystem around the networks. And Anant is hoping that as the world gets smarter, they will find more opportunities for the stuff that they're doing. Well, gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us here on this edition of Young Turks to talk about India's 5G bet and what startups at this point in time are trying to do to capitalize on it. And we wish you the very best of luck with your future plans. Appreciate your time here on the show. That's it then on this edition of Young Turks. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. The news continues right after this.